and 2 days passed before Terazawa, Erin, damn it all, would admit to herself this fake dream thing issue wasn't ending. 5 days of swallowing down panic when she woke up to the slight of lacquered wood against equally sealed wood or the ghost quiet whisper of a footfall, 6 of early morning calligraphy lessons, 2 afternoon herbology lectures, 9 days of dance lessons disguising instructions on how to fight with small blades hidden in fans, and silk done before the evening meal, and 2 late night and apparently risky chakra training sessions done on the sly. Nothing changed in respects to her foggy confusion. Aside the feeling of dread that started building up in the back of her mind the longer a few coincidental things kept reappearing. Shimiko kept a wary eye on her own daughter but, as the hours stretched into days, and the only problem became Tara's sudden confusion when encountering some of the chores she hadn't always done or the people that once knew her, the woman merely accepted the supposed fact some rogue Yamanaka had removed her memories. Nearly all of them, meaning that whatever it had not been was experimental and therefore likely not worth it to pick a fight over the compromised mind of a girl child. Katsutaro didn't bother, acting as if she had just taken a gigantic step backwards in development and was instead brain dead, rather than a murderously small person with compromised memories. Eventually, when it became apparent to others that shared their village compound thing, he stopped. Once his brother had a quiet word with him about exactly how few men there were left in the Sakanji family, and reminding him the women had been picking up the slack, until they could gather, breed, more. That was something else aside her rapidly dimming concerns between what had been, and what was to occupy herself with. She had her still frequent panic attacks, the night terrors where she dreamed of waking only to wake in this reality instead far from what had once been normal to her. However, they were exhausting to keep up with, and everything else Terazawa had to do in a day. Eventually, she just had to shove it aside as she worked to regain an even footing to do said panicking in. Whoa, she knew. It was hard to pretend ignorance after the one raid that crashed against the bulwark of their walls, and was turned away, using all the water in the pond to drown 6 men in the middle of a prairie. They were still trying to refill the pool before the willow tree died. Chakra, rumors of the Uchihas warring against the Senju clan, rogue Yamanakas screwing over random people for whichever reason, elemental manipulation, concealed weapons, poisons, taijutsu. If she wasn't sure entirely, the news filtering to an out-of-the-way collection of hovels in the land of grass of a 4-tailed bijou crashing against one of the towns on Earth would do it. The Naruto anime? Possibly the worst one possible to somehow fall into outside of the vaulted village hidden in the leaves, or another of the 5 great shinobi nations. Even more, to fall far outside any recognizable timeline, as there was no such thing as a hidden ninja village. There was no handy step-by-step guide for living in the Warring States era. It was all just a revolving morass of murder at this point. Frankly, it was entirely possible her whole family unit thing would be murdered off shortly, so she, or anything she knew, wouldn't matter then. Even so, when Naruto's canon began, she'd be an old woman if not long since dead. Life expectancies in this day and age was about 40. Maybe more in ninja, samurai, and the noble class, and less for regular people, but not really all that far apart. Worse still, getting married off as a broodmare after puberty was the social norm. Having at least one child by 14, and by 20 years 4 or 5 brats was respectable. Tara absently scrubbed harder at the stain in the cotton cloth, trying to leach the blood out of the yukata before a stain set in. It was one of Katsutaro's favorite, but he ended up wearing it into battle, when one of the guards reported suspicious movement a touch north of them high up in the mountains. Leaving it to soak momentarily, the stain was probably not coming out, but dyeing it in a new pattern or color was possible. She wondered with a purpose for that dye. Also, to do a bit of snooping. Shinobi family compound, or not, there was no other way to learn of things a girl child would not be told if she asked. There were about 30 males in the Sakanji family. There was 2 elderly males that didn't do anything constructive with their time, but probably deserved being lazy, one of which barely moved, much less realized he was present regardless of what happened, and 6 boy children. The rest were peppered between teenagers and middle-aged men, either learning to fight or going out to earn the money the clan existed upon. In contrast, there were 50 women, 14 girl children, of which Tara was one, 6 pregnant ladies and 2 newborn girls. Shimiko had announced a pregnancy around the moment when Tara could sense a tiny bit of rock grit in her usual feel, which might end up a girl again, since apparently of all the children she and Katsutaro had, only one had been a boy child, but he ended up stillborn. From the whispers she had gathered just doing chores around the compound as she was expected to, Tara had nearly had 3 elder siblings. The first boy child, who was dead on arrival, 2 sisters, of whose fate no one talked about as it either was not interesting or relevant, and then herself. Small wonder really. The human body wasn't entirely ready to bear a child by 14 years of age. It was possible, entirely so, but a baby was a highly resource-intensive thing to crank out. If you were a bit malnourished to start with, which was the norm given the risky and unstable supply lines for those that didn't make their own food like her family, then being pregnant came with even more risky complications than normal. Tara, Erin, had less than solid interest in childbearing, the fact she knew that actually made her slightly more knowledgeable than the fucking family healer, who prescribed a diet light on greens and heavy on meat to Shimiko for the duration of her pregnancy. At this moment, she was entirely unsurprised with the fact she was an only child for being her, not, mother's 4th pregnancy. In the life she wasn't trying to forget, but was becoming hazy through sheer time and emotional distance, she recalled having siblings. Did remember her former father's catering to her mother's whims, which included late-night trips to a 24-hour convenience store or gas station, and taking care of her siblings as well as being taken care of until she and her siblings split off to live their lives. Being the eldest was new. Pushing away the nearly crippling stab of homesickness, there was nothing to be done about it, and wallowing was terribly difficult to afford the time for here. Tara slinked away from the thin walls of the wooden and paper construct that passed as a home in order to pretend she wasn't eavesdropping. That depended on the next baby surviving the stupidity of this era, preferably without killing the woman that was practically Tara's only guide here. Digging the dye she had placed under the rock that edged the pool, in the thick and uneven glass jar that had been part of what Shimiko had gone into town to fetch for the family clan, Terazawa returned to the laundry efforts and spoke with the gray-haired woman overseeing it all. Her father's yukata and a few other pieces that were too stained to be left were gathered. A small drop of so dark it was black-green dye was dropped into a rusty kettle. After stirring it slowly for what felt like hours, the newly forest green garments were fished out and set out to dry. She very nearly got slapped for the failure. She who once was Erin stared flatly back at the man posing as a father when he expressed his displeasure. The formerly soft gray cotton was now deep green. She who was Tara was deeply terrified the defiance would hurt. The man wasn't a bully in any measure of the term, just entitled with a false sense of superiority being male in a male-dominated society gave him. He had expectations for what was proper, which jarred against the still developing sense of self that made up his supposed daughter. Brain-damaged little Terazawa that resulted ended up being the odd duck out, not proper in the least as a girl should be, yet conforming to expectations when it suited the situation. They were a hard kind of ninja, the type that survived only with others of their blood working in concert. They'd use that anyways.